Hey guys, today I want to talk about intercultural interactions. I've been living in former East Germany for a few years now, and it's an interesting thing living in a place as a foreigner where foreigners haven't been for the last several decades. There have been some here, but for the most part, they weren't entirely welcomed during the GDR times. And because of that, people have had less and less interactions with foreigners in this part of the country compared to other parts of Europe or even the western part of Germany. And so here I encounter a lot of people that mean well. I encounter a lot of overt racism, prejudices against other nationalities, but often I encounter people that are not against foreigners. They actually want to be welcoming, and nevertheless, they come off as very offensive. And foreigners of all skin tones, of all backgrounds, feel offended, and they feel like they're not welcome here because of it. And I just had an interaction where this took place, and it really taught me to not judge so quickly and to really try to lead a conversation with such people to help foreigners and Germans to come into conversation with each other so they learn how not to offend each other, because both sides are often assuming how they should interact, and because of that they then make mistakes and come off as offensive when they don't want to. So recently I was with a group of intercultural friends at a tourist place in the Ore Mountains in Erzgebirge in East Germany. And I was with a friend from an Asian country, and he is very tall. And a man came up to us, a shorter German man. He looked at one of the German guys that I was with, a white guy that I was with, and he pointed to our friend from Asia and he said, "That guy's really tall, huh? That guy's really tall for an Asian. Asian people, they don't ever grow so tall." Lots of problems here. Lots and lots of problems here. First of all, regardless of what culture you're in, it's never polite to point at someone, period. And especially not to point at someone and then talk about them, right? He didn't want to address our friend from Asia directly because he assumed that he couldn't speak German, which in conversation with other Germans afterwards, I've learned actually people do that in this culture because they don't want to embarrass foreigners if they don't speak German. They say, well, we don't want to expect that they have to speak German. Maybe they don't know it. Yes, but assuming that because someone doesn't look German, they can't speak German is in itself offensive, especially when foreigners live in Germany, right? If you live in this culture, I think it is okay to assume that the people will speak the language, particularly in the eastern part of Germany where English is never spoken. In lots of your bigger cities in Germany, English is spoken quite often. So in Hamburg, Berlin, Cologne, it could very well be the case that someone is from a different country and doesn't speak German. But in the eastern part of Germany, you have to speak German. And so it's better to assume that everyone speaks German, and if they don't, it's clear, especially when they have friends around, their friends will help translate. But if you want to know something about a person, it's always better to speak to that person directly. And then if they don't speak, then you can look for help in other ways. But just to assume that someone doesn't speak German because of their skin tone or the language that one speaks in the country that you're in is offensive and racist, even if it's not meant to be, right? And so he also assumed I was German, and then he spoke to me and it was clear that I was also foreign, also offensive. In Germany, you can have lots of different skin tones, you can look like you have different cultural backgrounds and still be a native there. Our friend was not, but he very well could have been, and how offensive would that have been for him to assume this person doesn't even speak German, and he could have very well grown up there. So it's never good to point, it's never good to talk about people, it's always better to talk directly to people. And you never want to assume someone's language abilities according to what they look like or where you assume they are from. You also don't want to make assumptions about a culture in general. This person said, "Oh, he's really tall for an Asian. Asians never get that tall." First of all, he was assuming that all Asians are very similar, Asia is a huge continent. I don't want to say what country my friend was from because I don't want to spotlight him, but you can't assume that everyone in Asia looks exactly the same, has the same background, have similarities. That's also in itself offensive. I said that would be the same thing as assuming that when you meet someone from Italy, but you know someone from Finland, and you ask them, well, why does your hair look that way? You know, Europeans are blonde. You know, you can't make these assumptions. It's also offensive, and it's offensive to minimize someone's culture, to say, well, all of Asia is like this. It's okay to say someone's tall. That's not offensive. He was trying to be polite. He was trying to inquire. He was curious, but he could have done that directly to my friend. Instead of saying something like, well, Asians don't get tall, say like, wow, you're really tall. Where are you from? It's okay to ask where you're from. And then to say, you're much taller than I am. You're much taller than I thought. You know, some people from your area are. Is that typical? It's okay to ask, what do you typically do or eat, or what do people typically look like? It's okay to express your ignorance and to say, I just don't know. But to go to a person with all these assumptions as if you know their culture when you clearly don't, because he clearly was ignorant that a person from this country could be so tall. Of course, we know that people can always look different than what people typically look like from every country. There's tall people, short people from everywhere. But still, you never want to address someone with assumptions about their own culture. If you haven't lived there, you can't assume you know things, but you can always ask questions and engage in a conversation. Our friend would have appreciated that, but I don't want to be spoken to with assumptions, because then it comes off as offensive. And so when I explained that to this man, that was offensive, that he can't point at our friend, he can't talk about our friend, but he can talk directly to someone and ask questions, then the man apologized. And I now understand that maybe the German way of thinking about it, after talking to my other German friends, was they didn't want to embarrass this person, but they definitely wanted to talk about it. They wanted to learn something from this person. And I explained, well, that was nice that he was trying to be polite, but he then unfortunately was more offensive than if he hadn't said anything at all. And so if he's curious, it's great to be curious. We all want to get to know each other. We want to learn from our diversity. So if you want to learn from one another, talk to someone directly and ask questions. It's okay to be curious, but don't make assumptions. And above everything else, be nice and be willing to admit when you don't know things and that you're wrong, and say, I just want to learn from you. I'm happy that we're becoming a more diverse place, and hopefully we can stick together in the future. Thanks, guys. Have a great week.